Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, Perspectives on Inclusion. This program is dedicated to educating the general public about issues that are important to the disability community. And we hope and believe that you will recognize that these same issues are important to everybody because people with disabilities certainly are a major part of the community at large. Hello It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and our good friends here at Public Access Television. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work at the Center for Disabilities and Development, and I serve as a co-host for Hello It's Us. Keith?
Yes, and today I finally can say I'm an author.
The book is, go ahead.
And on the other hand, unlike we do this show weekly, welcome all of you.
And today, it's really all of you. We have, I think we're setting a record here. This is really awesome. For the next 2 weeks, we will be talking about the upcoming legislative session with a group of esteemed Johnson County legislators here, and just getting some personal reflections as well. We always look forward to this show, and there obviously are no shortage of issues. So without further ado, we're going to introduce the panel, and I think we'll start with Senator Bolcom, if you want to, and then we'll just go around. You can share whatever you choose in terms of who you are, what brought you to the legislature, topics of interest to you. We'll just do a little free flow here.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Keith. It's good to be here. I'm Joe Bolcom. I'm a member of the Iowa Senate. I just got reelected to my 6th term. Wow is right, Mike. Happy to be back. Look forward to questions today. We get ready to go back in about a month to the legislature, the 2019 session, a brand new General Assembly, about 30 new members across both chambers. And we'll be back trying to work on education funding, continue to try and fix this broken Medicaid privatization program, invest in workforce development. I hope that we begin to put together a plan for the state to finally deal with some of the concerns that we've seen recently about climate change and its impact on Iowa agriculture. So that's a few topics. I look forward to the discussion today.
Great, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, and this is not a paid announcement, but I'll just hold it like this, Keith, during my introduction. I'm State Representative Dave Jacoby, represent Coralville and Iowa City and Penn Township. And what's interesting, look at 30,000 feet above, I'm a little concerned about two things in Iowa. Number one, life expectancy in Iowa is declining.
Wow.
And the second piece I'm concerned about is our test scores are declining too. And I do believe that that's a direct relationship with how we're funding, or better yet, how we're not funding our schools. I'm the ranking member on Ways and Means, and this year we'll be looking at some more tax issues. I'm sure corporate income tax will be discussed, but what I'm really concerned about is that if we're going to pass any tax measures, good or bad, before we have our tax review committee that's set to meet next summer, after the session during the summer, then we're set up to review all tax credits and what we're doing with our taxation system in Iowa. Seems to me a little backwards that we should do a complete review of tax credits where we're sitting before we move forward with any more tax policy. But looking forward to the discussion, and again, thank you for the show today, and Keith, thank you for the book. You're an author.
Yay.
I'm State Representative Mary Masher, and good morning, Keith and Michael. We're glad to be here. This is one of our favorite shows, so we're glad that you host us and allow us to come in and talk a little bit about the upcoming session. Keith, congratulations. This has been a work in progress, I know, all of your life, I think for 73 years, right? And so it's great to see it, and I'm anxious to read it, so thank you again for being an author and sharing your life with us. Thank you. I am on the state government committee. I'm ranking member of that committee. I am also on education, appropriations, and then the transportation infrastructure appropriations. So those are the committees that I'll serve on this year. I am starting my 25th year in the legislature, 13 sessions. So I've seen a lot during that time, and obviously the biggest issue before us is the budget. And obviously we're looking at how do we balance that budget and provide for the people of Iowa, because we have a lot of needs out there that have not been met, whether it's through Medicaid funding, education funding, human services, mental health. Those are all issues that are before us this session, and ones that we really and truly need to spend some time delving into, and again, making sure that we meet the needs of the people of Iowa. David talked about education and the lack of funding. That is becoming a critical issue in our public K-12 schools, but it's also affecting our community colleges and our region institutions as tuitions are increasing for students who are trying to get that education and that good paying job. We have an exodus of young people in Iowa, and I'm looking for Zach to solve that problem. But it's one of those issues where we educate our kids and they do really well, and then they leave the state and go and make good money elsewhere. Bob's got a couple of girls that are doing just that, and he's not unusual. There are many families and folks doing that right now. We've got to figure out a way to educate our kids and keep them in Iowa, and that's something that I'm interested in and anxious to find some solutions for. Thanks again for inviting us.
Thank you.
Zach,
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me to join the panel. I think I'm the only one for whom this is my first time joining you, so I'm excited to be a part of the discussion today. And thank you to everybody who's watching at home for being interested in this program and wanting to learn more about what's going to happen here in the 2019 session. My name is Zach Walls. I'm the state senator-elect succeeding Senator Bob Dvorsky, and I'll be joining the legislature here in January 14th when the session gets started. The district that I'll be representing in the Iowa Senate includes all of Coralville, part of Iowa City, and then rural kind of northeastern Johnson County, and then all of Cedar County, and down to the little town of Wilton, down to Muscatine County. So it's a relatively large area, covers a lot of kind of different kinds of communities here in our state. Now, some of the issues that I heard about during my campaign that I'm excited to work on, the big things, education and brain drain, are definitely two of the biggest issues. And in fact, Representative Masher was my 5th and 6th grade science teacher. I was an elementary school student here in Iowa City, so I know just how important our public education system is. And then I also have heard some really specific things like making sure that we're able to expand what's called the Save Penny. It's a way of funding our schools. That's something that passed the House last year, but we weren't able to get it done in the Senate. So my hope is that this year there might be some appetite to get that done. I'm also deeply concerned about the state of Medicaid privatization and trying to figure out a way to make managed care work for the folks who actually really need and depend on those benefits, and so that's going to be a big priority as well. And then I'm also going to be serving on the Agriculture Committee along with Senator Kinney, who's the ranking member on that committee, and looking forward to seeing what we can do to support our farmers, because I do believe that that's a very important part of our rural economy. And when it comes to keeping folks in Iowa, I think making sure that we have our strong rural communities, small towns, is an important part of making sure that we aren't losing people out of state.
Good. Oh, we've got some great topics to cover here. So,
Bob, you're next.
Thank you. State Senator Bob Dvorsky, just filling out my last few days as state senator. As Senator, like Zach said, that he's going to get sworn in on January 14th. Then I'll be off to retirement. So just briefly, a little bit of reflection on the past 32 years in Des Moines. Well, first of all, congratulations, Keith, to being an author and all that thing. The last 2 years for me were just the worst 2 years of my 32-year career. The Republicans were so partisan and so unwilling to take any compromise at all, and passed all kinds of horrendous legislation, that sort of thing. I'm hopeful that this, starting in 19, with a few more Democrats in the Iowa House, that we'll be able to do a little bit better, and there'll working together and all that. That's one of the sad things over the last several years. I think after the Democrats lost control of the Iowa Senate in the 1996 election, people like Senator Steve King and others came in. And since then, unfortunately, it's kind of gotten more partisan over the years. So that's an unfortunate thing, but maybe we'll do a little bit better here. I did want to note that one of the things, and this is true in a lot of areas we deal with every morning, but you run into some people who are consistently always there and always helpful and always useful to the programs you're working on. And I think we have two here today that have been champions for people with disabilities for years. I mean, Keith has got his book out. Michael's always there. I really appreciated your guidance and your help over all these years. That you were role models to me on being advocates for people with disabilities, and I appreciate that. And I think people watching appreciate it also. So that's one of the good things, is knowing people like you two and others, and all my colleagues here. Going to miss all the people that I serve with, but it's time to move on, and I'm certainly happy with my replacement. Zach's going to be in the Iowa Senate along with two other guys named Zach.
Yeah.
I noticed there's nobody named Bob there anymore. Or Dave.
Or
They're all named Zach, that kind of thing. So good luck to them, and good luck to everyone else.
Well, I just, before we move on to Kevin, I just, the feeling is mutual. Bob, feel free to jump in, Keith, as well. But I mentioned something to Senator Bolton before we got on the air about his contributions to not only disability, but meeting and working with students. We have a leadership training program called Iowans that is a part of the Center for Disabilities and Development where I work. And I know that you've actually come in numerous times to talk with the students for their seminar and met with them when you were available. And I think that is, that I come back and go to those seminars afterward and hear students talking about how welcoming the Johnson County delegation has been. And I know that that's something, Senator Dvorsky, that you've modeled in your 32 years of always being there for the people. And I think, when that message is getting out to the young people, as we've already talked about, keeping young people in Iowa, when they see that kind of leadership, that goes a long way to helping them realize that their voices are heard, and that's a message that's always been near and dear to my heart. So thanks.
Bob, I'll never forget you. Did the work in the Senate. You make people realize that people with disabilities are people first.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Senator Kenny.
Hi, thanks Mike and Keith for having us here today. I look forward to this program. I find it to be very informative. I'm Kevin Kinney. I serve Senate District 39, which is western and southern Johnson County, most of Washington County, and all of Keokuk County. A couple of the things that I really am concerned about is in the last few days, even in the paper, they've been talking about the increased suicide rates here in the state of Iowa and the shape of our mental health here in Iowa. And one of the things that I would like to see and work on is trying to get the mental health situation straightened out here in Iowa so we can serve those people. It's not just in urban areas. The suicide rate among agriculture workers is really on the increase also. I serve as the ranking member, as I said, on agriculture, and I also serve as ranking member on the judiciary this year. This will be the first year that I'm doing that. I am going to offer a piece of legislation this year that deals with the elderly and disabled people, people defrauding them. And if you're in a nursing home or somewhere and people don't have control of your finances and they do not pay for your stays in those facilities and are taking that money for themselves, and benefiting, we need to begin looking at that. I've been working with the Attorney General's office this year and coming up with legislation to confront that.
That's great. Well, thanks. I guess we got everybody in here. Yeah. We always, for those of you out there, and for the benefit of the legislators here that may not remember, we do put together a little kind of an outline of how we think things might go. But Keith and I are both really flexible and in terms of how we do this. And I guess I would be really, Keith, you were the person who, Keith and I always sit down ahead of time and put the outline together for topics. And I know that you were really strong on wanting us to make sure that we talked about education funding. And as it turns out, many of you have spoken about that in your introductions. And so maybe I think that's a good place to start in terms of, we're hearing Iowa has always been known as a place where education is a high priority. And we have some of the best test scores, and I remember growing up even being proud that, gosh, I live in Iowa, I'm going to get a good education, and clearly we have, all of you, it sounds like, are committed to continuing that legacy, but we're obviously hearing that our outcomes aren't where they need to be, and that we need to improve them. And so I would be interested in, Keith, put your own spin on this too, that I think talking a little bit about what your thoughts are about what's gone wrong, and what it's going to take to restore us to the top of the list in education.
I lived in Iowa just to go to the university, and that was back in the 80s, and I've seen a steady decline in funding. What are we going, or what are you going to try to do about it?
Keith, one of the things that we can do as a minority is work with our colleagues on the other side, the Republicans, to try and encourage them to meet with their school districts, talk to those individuals in the classrooms, the teachers, and see what they're facing right now. We have a lot of teachers who are concerned about the mental health of their students. We have teachers that are concerned about class size and the fact that those have been increasing, especially in areas like Iowa City, where we have a growing population and district. And so it makes it very difficult then to meet the needs of a diverse group of learners. We have more ELL students, more minority students, more kids who have been in poverty, and that creates, again, some barriers for learning. And so working with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and trying to convince them that education is really an investment. It isn't an expense, it's an investment in our future. And having kids prepared for that workforce is critical in order for us to have, again, good paying jobs in Iowa and to provide that for our businesses. So the best thing we can do is to try to find that bipartisan effort and to get the commitment from both Republicans and Democrats. In the past, we would set allowable growth or funding for schools 2 years in advance. We're no longer doing that, and they've changed the law to prevent that from happening. So the reason we did it that early was because we wanted districts to have predictability. They wanted to be able to manage their budgets and figure out exactly how much they would have available in order to teach the kids in their classrooms. Well, that no longer exists, and so that's made it more difficult for districts to plan in advance. And again, that's been a challenge for us.
That sounds like it.
Well, I think sometimes too, you see almost an anger from certain people about public education. In fact, we just had a forum a week or two ago, and one of the proposals from one of the two gentlemen from Americans for Prosperity was advocating for people to teach themselves.
Ooh, to teach them children? To teach themselves?
Correct. Correct. So there's a battle right now that we wage every day for the 110-day session toward the value of education, the value of public education. And we have some individuals, quite honestly, that do not put a value on public education. Or we have a Speaker Pro Tem in the House who said, I was taught at home, didn't need to go to any post-secondary training, and I turned out okay. Well, I don't want to argue that point, but it points to the fact that there's not a particular value set for some people on public education. And that goes to your comment, Keith, about how the money has declined investing in the university. Well, the keep moving the goalposts saying, well, you need to find different ways. Well, there's only so many limited ways to fund public education, and that's with public investment. So I think that's part of what we're dealing with. And how I'm saying in the Senate is putting that value back on public education, whether it's pre-K, K-12, any kind of post-secondary training, 1 or 2 years at the community colleges or our 4-year colleges.
Everybody talks about education being the top priority. The governor does, Republicans do, Democrats do. And you know, if you look at what the rhetoric versus, you know, people's actions, we've just been through like the last 8 years of Republican control of state government, and we've seen the lowest appropriations to K-12, our community colleges, and our public universities. We pretty much starved them. And so the priority that they put on it through the budgeting process has not really followed their words about the need to invest. We have a group right now that really thinks that smaller government is best government. And when we have small government, we have schools closed, we have increasing class size, we have old textbooks, and we probably down the road have fewer people wanting to become teachers in Iowa, the best and our brightest students who we want in our classroom. So we've kind of been on this kind of downward spiral, and if you look at the current budget against the recent budgets, we've just given away way too much in tax giveaways to large out-of-state corporations. And actually the tax cut that was passed this current year in 2018 gives about half of the overall tax cut to less than 3% of taxpayers. It looks like, if you look over the next few years, the amount of money that's going to go back to wealthy individuals and large out-of-state corporations is going to continue to hinder our ability to invest in public education, even though we just ended a campaign where Republicans and the Governor Reynolds says, education's our top priority. Well, the cookie jar is going to be, it's going to have crumbs in it around the time people look at what the appropriations are going to be to get back on track. So people that care about public education need to continue to be very active on this whole question of debating the size of government and having an effective education system in Iowa.
Are the teachers, the Iowa, oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Iowa State Education
Association, yeah, ISEA, I couldn't.
That's right.
Are they active in terms of, do they have a strong lobby, and you know, is that something that if people are passionate about this issue that they could align themselves with an organization like that, or do you have to actually be a teacher in order to belong to that? Because I'm just thinking of ways that our viewership might take up the cause. I mean, clearly, you know, talking to legislators is one thing, but are there ways that people can unite with groups like that to
Oh, Iowans for Public
Yeah,
Education.
there's a, Mike, there's a group called Iowans for Public Education that actually, a woman from Johnson County started, and they really are trying to kind of fill that void to support public education. So you can probably go on their website and see how you can get involved with them. But they have a large following that's really been trying to do things the last couple of years.
I'm worried about good professors are leaving the college. We're getting a lot of broken professors in their place. Is there anything we can do about that? because the college, when I can't do it, was a good college. It still is, but the professors are leaving for other places.
Keith, I'll speak to that just a little bit. I'll actually be serving on the Education Appropriations Subcommittee on the Senate side, which plays a very significant role in funding both our K-12 and our higher education institutions, both the region system and our community colleges. And I think that what I've heard is that what we've seen over the last several decades is declining investment by the state in our higher education system. I think part of this is a real disagreement about the role of public education and higher education. Is this a public good that all the Iowans benefit from if you have more folks who are seeking and receiving higher education? Or is it a private good where it's a transaction? You go and you pay your tuition and you get this degree, and it's a private exchange of funds for goods and services from the university. And I think as Democrats, one of the things that we really believe is that higher education is a public good, and that our entire state is better off when you see folks have more education, especially from our university system or our community colleges. And to tie it back to something that Senator Kinney mentioned earlier about life expectancy and some of the changes that we're seeing in mental health, one of the best predictors as to whether or not you'll wind up ending your own life is actually your educational attainment. You're seeing the greatest increases in some of these kind of so-called deaths of despair that are related to suicide, drug overdose, are folks who don't have a bachelor's degree. And folks who do have a bachelor's degree are dramatically less likely to see that happen. And so I do think it's very important for lawmakers to be thinking that in understanding that your higher education is not just a private good. This is something that really is good for all Iowans. The more folks who are able to access higher education, the better off we're all going to be.
Well, and I thank you very much for that comment. I cannot believe this, but we are at time for our first segment, and we'll have plenty of time plenty of topics to pick up from during episode 2. But we certainly want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. It's been a very lively discussion as always. And we really appreciate all of you out there viewing either on PATV or on YouTube. And once again, want to thank our sponsors. And I'll turn it over to Keith to close us out.
Have a great week out there. Enjoy the warm weather. Well, we got it.